The Persephone Foundation. Timeline Archives. Timeline designation Eta Omega-001. Codenamed A Different Revolution. As the fires of revolution spread across the North American continent, the colonies north of the infamous 13 were skeptical of what their southern brothers were up to. However, the death of the governor of Quebec would change much. Replacing him would be a far more paranoid and cruel man, who would begin anti-sedition programs across the colony. As Quebec began its own militias and independence movements, the governors and leaders of the surrounding northern colonies began to try and suppress the rebels as well, leading to an uprising of all of British North America against British rule. However, as the two rogue nations that would become the United States of Allegheny and the United States of Alba Honoria began to fight, an issue of politics arose. The Alleghenish had proposed a representative system, in which there would be no true executive leader. Instead, while a president of the Congress was elected to act as presiding officer, the two houses of Congress would act as both legislature and executive. The Alba-Honorians, on the other hand, preferred a powerful executive. The Alba-Honorian consul had all the powers of the British king, essentially turning the country into an elective monarchy with term limits. At first, this presented a little issue. Not only was neither region free, but neither system could have been implemented. However, as the war turned in favor of the Americans, the debate became hot. As the government remained disjointed, the British began to re-advance. Both factions blamed the other, and the United States of America splintered into the two previously described states. Thanks to greater French aid to Alba Honoria, the northern region had become entirely independent by 1780, whereas the Alleghenish were still fighting in nearly every province. Bringing the British to the bargaining table, the Alba Honorians felt somewhat obliged to ensure Alleghenish independence as well as their own. In 1781, the North American War of Independence ended. In Allegheny, chaos quickly began to take root as the powers given to Congress were too minimal for the nation to function. Soon it collapsed, and for 2 years anarchy reigned. But a much stronger nation would arise in Allegheny's place. The Federation of Anglo-American States was established by such minds as Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. Having more power be given to Congress, although the FAAS still notably lacks any executive. As order was re-established, the USA and FAAS immediately began a frontier rivalry, claiming westward lands back and forth. This would only stand as the beginning of what would eventually become the Cold War. In the year 1966, the world watches in fear of the political gridlock that is the Cold War. The FAAS and the USSR continue to spread their brand of executive-less governance, be it capitalist or communist. In response, the Alba Honorians and their allies try to prop up various constitutional monarchies and strong executive republics. Brazil and Argentina wage war once more, many fearing the conflict may turn nuclear. The Indian subcontinent has descended into proxy warfare. The FAAS faces revolts and independence movements against its state-level apartheid program. The Middle East is quickly eclipsing Europe as the center of civilization as the EPET countries, Ethiopia, Persia, Turkey, and Egypt, and their massive economies spur on growth. Worse still, Napoleonic France eyes Iberia hungrily. Those in the Reich Republic dream of reclaiming Germany's lost glory under King Adolf, and Mittel Europa knows they are the first on the hit list. The world is a shaky, changing place. Points of interest. the Swiss-led Confederation of Mitteleuropa, which was formed after the Central European Republic was trounced by Germany and the Swiss in the Second Great War, with Switzerland and its rather monolithic army occupying all the nations within. After years of sapping the nation for resources, constant occupation long after the war, and increasing enmity between the Swiss and the Central Europeans, an official annexation was declared, and the creation of the Confederation. The Anglo-American puppet of the German Democratic Free State, also known as the Fourth Reich or as the Reich Republic, which replaced the new German Empire under King Adolf Schnickelgruber Rothschild and his National Vigilance Party, which had tried to purge Germany of all immigrants, as well as Anglo-Saxons in the West after the beginning of war with the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Ireland, and Normandy. The old New German Empire was an elective monarchy with a weak legislature that was second to the king, and the Reich Republic now has no executive except for a president of the Reichstag, the elected prime minister that has little power. However, the king does still exist and is still elected, being now a figurehead that works as the head of diplomacy and external affairs, with Reichstag-appointed diplomats serving beneath him. The buffer state of Transylvania, capital in Bucharest, which was formerly the capital of Romania before the Communist Revolution, which moved it to Cluj, was created following the Bulgarian-Romanian War, and is the Egyptians' pride and joy as their first show of their ability as a major power. The Papal-led Italian Alliance, which has increasingly become a Holy Roman Empire-like organization that has its power in the Holy See, as most of the Italian countries have an equal share of cardinals in the collective, many of which also happen, by complete coincidence of course, to be members of each nation's ruling family, in the case of North Italy and the Two Sicilies, or incredibly wealthy families, in the case of the Sardinian Republic and the Papal States. The newly created Socialist Congress Republic of West Australia, which has only some international recognition, despite having the Australian government be one of the few to recognize them. They remain hopeful that the FAAS and their sphere of influence will recognize them, even if they reject the Anglo-American apartheid system that the Republic of Australia and the Republic of New Zealand have so greatly embraced. Revolts by Native Americans, the Green, and African Americans, Black-Gray, to form their own states, since the Anglo-American apartheid system is to give blacks and natives their own states on the African coast and out west, respectively. As a side note, Cuba is the only state that doesn't enforce segregation. And of course, the Jewish country of Judea Nova in Madagascar, created as a safe haven for Jews that believe they cannot return to their homeland until the Messiah returns. They have faced internal conflict from Messianic Jews that have created some strange new movement they call Zionism. The Republic of Palestine, which has been a historical Jewish ally, creating an entire autonomous region around Jerusalem for Jews that have come to the Holy Land, has grown weary as Zionist terrorist groups have made threats to take over the country. This has been a Persephone Foundation Timeline Reading. Thank you for listening.